Our story begins during a hard fight between the Emperor of the Sword and an evil moon fairy, who tries to kill him, and when she is about to do it, a new character appears, Yeon Morion, the swordsman who splits the moon, who, after a great demonstration of bravery, kills the fairy and manages to save the Emperor. 6 years later, in Waryong Mansion, Yeon Moriong's house, we find another reality. A woman, Moriong's first wife, is scolding a red-haired boy because he has not fulfilled the task of cleaning the bottom of the courtyard. The angry woman asks him if he does not remember that important visitors are coming that day and scolds him because she thinks that, not being his mother, the boy does not pay attention to her. After hitting him, she asks him to get up. The little boy, frightened by the woman's shouts and blows, replies that he will listen to her and goes to clean up. Near them, there are 3 children watching what is happening, and 2 of them laugh when they see how the child is being beaten. At that moment, near the house, you can see a chariot where 4 people are traveling: the Emperor of the Sword, his wife and their 2 children. During their journey to the house, the father tells his family that they are going to meet his only sworn brother, his uncle Murion, who saved him 6 years ago, when he was about to die. While the father talks about his sworn brother's strength and agility, he asks his children to fix their clothes, so that they look presentable. Chun, the Emperor's son, is curious about his uncle and asks his father questions, and he replies that his uncle executed the most perfect sword arts he had ever seen, and that his 9 Heavens sword technique is capable of matching the advanced techniques of his clan, the Nangong clan. After listening to his father, the son asks why his uncle's sword technique is not yet known. His father, to answer his doubt and to prevent his son from offending his uncle, tells him a story. His uncle had 2 wives, but he was especially fond of the second one, who died 6 years ago, after having a baby. This made his uncle very sad, and he retired. That's why you don't know his technique, so please don't tell him anything about his second wife. So, I will, replied to his son Chun. Back in the house, one of the employees is running down the hallway, while the woman is scolding the boy, and she asks the employee what's wrong, and the employee tells her that her husband has come out of his room, knowing that his sworn brother's carriage was near the house and that now he was about to go out to meet them. The woman, after hearing this, felt annoyed, because her husband had not left his room for 6 years and had left them alone, and, looking at the child, told him that he would finally meet his father, but that, in order not to be seen with his dirty clothes by the guests, he should hide. The boy replies that he is going to hide, and she smiles happily at what the boy said and tells him to think about what he has done. The woman leaves him and goes to meet the 3 children who were looking at her earlier, and asks them if they are ready to meet their uncle, and they say yes. Then she looks at the older boy and asks him to be nice to her cousin. At the entrance of the house, the sworn siblings meet and greet each other warmly. The newcomer apologizes for not coming to visit earlier and introduces him to his family. The woman and the young man greet him. Young Chun was shocked to see his father's hero skinny and emaciated. He thought he imagined seeing him different and remembered the 6 years he was locked up. The father looks for his daughter to introduce her to, but the daughter is not there. She has run away to play. The Emperor comments to his brother that his daughter often plays hide and seek and apologizes, but his brother smiles and says that nothing is wrong and behind him. His wife comments that his 4th son also plays hide and seek and asks him to introduce her and the children. Moriong points them out and introduces them as his family, and the wife tells them that his name is Beek Miju, and invites them to come in and rest from their long journey. As they enter, she asks her son Nubik to look for the missing girl and befriend her. On the terrace of the house, there is the boy who was punished, kneeling with his hands up, waiting for the visitor to leave, so that his punishment will be over. He is tired from being in that position and is hungry. After a long time, tiredness overcomes him and he lies down on the floor, but he is frightened when he sees someone nearby, but realizes that it is not the first mother, whom he fears so much, but a girl. Back at home, the 2 brothers and their wives are talking, and one of them comes up with the idea of marrying off his children, and everyone except Yeon is happy with the proposal. The Emperor sees his brother thoughtful and asks him if he agrees to unite their clans, and Moriong tells him that he prefers his children to decide about their marriage and says that he thinks that the children's life does not belong to the parents. His brother understands his reasons, but his wife, annoyed, thinks that he is sorry for marrying her and that he is not helping her in anything for the family to move forward. And seeing the Emperor, insists, saying, "Don't you think that our children could like each other?" And the Emperor replies that he thinks so and that they will have more opportunities to see each other to get to know each other. Meiju, excited by the answer, proposes to the Emperor that his clan train his son Mubik in his techniques, and although the Emperor looks at his brother with astonishment, he also asks the same and says that he believes that his son already knows his technique of the Sword of the 9 Heavens and that he wants him to learn more. but that his health is not going to allow him to train him. Suddenly, he starts coughing and faints. Nubik, meanwhile, is looking for his cousin when he sees his cousin talking to his little sister, who asks him about his nickname and the legends he has read about him. Nubik approaches and apologizes to his cousin for his sister Seolju, and his cousin laughs and tells him that he is not bothering him. Seolju gets upset with his brother, but he tells him that he should not ask personal questions to someone he just met, that it is rude to do so, and then asks his cousin if he knows where his sister is, because he wants to befriend him. Yeon replies that he would like very much for them to become friends and that he also went out to look for her. While they talk, they all go together to look for the girl. Again, the punished boy can be seen in front of the girl who went out to hide, and he wonders who she could be. He notices that she is very pretty and details her clothes. He thinks she is one of the important visitors and thinks about the new punishment for not staying away from the visitors. She looks at him while he thinks, and suddenly, he decides to run to get away, but she stops him and realizes that he may be her uncle's son. But she sees him very skinny, with wounds on his body, and realizes that he is very scared. While she hears that the boy keeps saying sorry, the girl approaches and realizes that the boy has not been well cared for and asks him his name. The boy replies, Jaka Yeon. The girl repeats his name, hugs him and tells him that she will protect him, and the boy starts to cry. After hugging him, she takes him by the hand and asks him to come with her. Together they enter a hole in a wall. The girl took Jaka by the hand and led him to the village and fed him. But on the way, they met some warriors on their way. Jaka was frightened, but his cousin took him by the hand to follow. While that was happening, the emperor was in his brother's room, waiting for him to wake up, and when he did, he asked him about his health and he felt sorry for what happened, because he had not been able to avoid fainting, and looking at his brother he said, I told you that the advanced technique of my clan is transmitted through the Jiyushin Chuanu, right? However, I can no longer see through the Jiyushin Chuanu. While his brother listened to him, Yeon told him that everything had happened that day when his second wife died, leaving a baby he did not feel like meeting, because, although he knew he was not to blame, he believes that by meeting him, he will hate him for the death of his wife. After listening to his brother, the emperor tried to comfort him and asked him to rest, that he was not used to see him so weak. But Mariam continued saying, I would like to ask you one last favor. I would like you to take care of my children. The emperor asked him not to say that and to rest, but he continued to ask for his children, because he knew that they were alone, without a father for a long time. Outside the house, near Mariang's room, were the two wives of the sworn brothers, waiting for news, when they saw some warriors arrive, who found the children in the village and took them back home. There the two mothers were distressed for the children, and Beek thanked the girl for finding Jiaka. Soon after, the children's siblings showed up to find out what was going on and saw that the girl would not let go of Jiaka's hand, but her family took her inside the house, while Beek stayed behind to scold the boy. Soon after, in the month of September that year, Yeon Mariam, Jiaka's father, died, and his first mother summoned more than 20 warriors from her own clan to the Yeon clan to fill his absence. These warriors became a squadron within the mansion. That squadron was called White Tiger, and since Mubik had gone to the Nangong clan for training, it was she, Beek Mijo, who took over as the official master of Warjeong Mansion. One day, at the White Tiger squadron headquarters, Beek approaches one of the warriors and, annoyed, asks him if he hasn't found any martial arts manuals of her late husband. But the warrior tells him that he hasn't. Beek becomes much more annoyed with his answer and orders him to keep all the papers related to her husband where she cannot see them. As the warrior was about to start with his task, she ordered him to lock up Jiaka as well. The warrior took the things and the child and left them in a storeroom. Jiaka begged not to be left there, but the warrior told him he had to if he wanted to continue living, and locked him in. Jiaka spent the night in the warehouse, wondering how long he would be locked up, and feeling cold and afraid. The next day, in the morning, the boy sees a hard bread and water left for him by a small door and complained, because he wanted to eat well too. But while he was eating breakfast, he saw a bright light and decided to see. Right where the light could be seen, there was a mirror. He checked it and realized that it was very dusty, so he cleaned it and saw his reflection. He smiled and asked his reflection in the mirror if he too had been abandoned, and he was very scared to see that his reflection in the mirror smiled at him. Winter has arrived and Jiaka is still alone in the warehouse. Outside, two warriors can be seen watching and commenting to each other that the boy has been locked up for a long time, and that it is cold. They believe that the boy will die soon, because the food rations are getting smaller and smaller, and it is very cold. Inside the warehouse, the boy is huddled in a corner, while in the mirror, his reflection is moving and calling out to him, and upon seeing him, he tells him that he is no longer afraid of him, that now he is only cold. His reflection listens to him and moves from one side to the other, thinking, when suddenly, he begins to make movements with a wooden stick. The boy is curious to see what his reflection is doing and thinks he is dancing to get his attention. Gyaka sees the mirror and realizes that he has seen those moves somewhere. They are the arts of the 9 heavens, the martial art moves he had seen his brothers do. Gyaka kept watching the mirror train, but he was very cold. Suddenly, he remembered that when his brothers trained, they could make warm air with those moves in winter and started training. While training, he told the mirror that I did not follow him because I wanted to, but to at least survive the cold. After a while, doing the exercises little by little, he produced hot air and felt good. But he noticed that the mirror asked him to do more. But he looked at it and told it that he didn't want to imitate it. He just wanted to keep warm. Then he turned around to go to another place in the warehouse. But he noticed that the mirror did more complicated movements and told it that he didn't want to do them. But the mirror looked at him and gave him a pout. Gyaka was annoyed by the gesture of his image in the mirror and asked the mirror if he didn't think that soon he could perform such complicated movements and started training. There were times when he could not keep up with the mirror and saw his reflection mocking him, and this made him very angry. But he remembered the moves, thought about his mistakes and kept trying. After a lot of trying, Gyaka got annoyed and decided to cover the mirror with a cloth. But his reflection peeked out from underneath and told the boy that he was going to teach him. Gyaka got excited and uncovered it but warned the mirror not to trick him or he would cover it up again. A moment later, the boy saw the 900 words that were inside the mirror of the Gyushin fairy appear, and although they were complicated, he managed to understand them and realized that the complicated movements that his reflection in the mirror made were nothing more than the celestial inquisitive sword technique, and this changed the life of that unfortunate boy who had been locked in the warehouse, because his confinement allowed him to concentrate on learning that complicated technique that his father had mastered. Gyaka's confinement lasted 10 years and the young man continues to practice the movements in the mirror and feels satisfied with his achievements. He is finally performing the movements exactly as he sees them in the mirror. Mubik returns after 10 years of absence and his family receives him excited. His mother hugs him and tells him that he looks very handsome and that when he finishes his training, now his clan will be the strongest in the whole Henan province. Behind Mubik came 2 young men, Chun and his sister. Beek saw them and apologized for not greeting them earlier and congratulated Chun because his sword art was famous and referred to him saying, "There is no one who does not know the name the Blue Cloud Sword." Then he sees Yon and tells her that she is incredibly beautiful. When he finishes greeting the boys, he invites them to come in and rest, but Yon turns away without greeting. Chun calls her attention, but she ignores him and Beek tells her that it is of no importance and invites them into the house, but calls one of his warriors and asks him to prevent Yon from going near the storehouse and finding Gyaka. But the warrior tells him that the day before he had gone to check the storehouse and had not found the young man. Hearing this, Beek was furious. A day earlier, Gyaka had performed the movements perfectly in the mirror and his reflection applauded him excitedly. The young man was telling the mirror that he had already learned all the techniques and wanted to know what else he could learn. But his reflection surprised him. Pointing upwards, Gyaka looked up at the ceiling of the warehouse and realized there was a hole. He quickly made a ladder out of the boxes in the warehouse and looked up to see the sky again. After 10 years and wondered if he could get out, he climbed up and asked the mirror to produce him to see the sky. But the mirror no longer had a reflection. Gyaka stayed on the roof and spent the whole day there. Beek, after learning that Gyaka was gone, runs to the storehouse and after looking for him, realizes that he could have left through the hole in the roof and told his warriors not to look for him, because he was an ungrateful man who ran away from the clan that fed him. While thinking that the young man had no chance of living outside the storehouse, because he did not know how to make a living, days passed and Mubik is with his mother, asking her about his younger brother. She tells him that she thinks he left 3 days ago and that she has sent for him, but they have not found him yet. Mubik, worried, tells his mother that his brother has nowhere to go, and she replies that he was motivated by the news that his brother would return victorious from his training. Suddenly, a voice interrupts the conversation. It was young Yon, who hurries to ask about Gyaka. Her mother tells her not to worry, but she tells him that although it has been 3 days since her cousin disappeared, it seems that no one has been living in his room for a long time. Beek insists not to worry, but she turns around and leaves. As Yon leaves, Beek complains about the girl's manners and Mubik returns to ask his mother about his brother and tells her that Yon has the ability to read minds and that she doesn't act that way for nothing, and that there is nothing she cannot figure out when something interests her. Mubik culminates by saying, if a woman like her is in a bad enough mood to ignore us, there must be some reason. Beek told his son that he had not killed him and that, yes, it was true that he had escaped, but that he did not live in his room, but in the storeroom. A while later, Mubik met Yon at the warehouse and she told him that she already knew that the boy had been living there and told him that she would tell his father what had happened, warning him that, although Mubik had been her disciple, the relationship between the two clans could not remain the same. After what had happened, Yeon said goodbye to Mubik and left. Mubik was left wondering what he should do. After the relationship between him, his master and his martial sister had been broken. Meanwhile, in the village, Jiaka was watching in amazement how everything had changed, and suddenly, he bumped into someone. It was a grumpy man, but he remembered him as a swordsman from Waryong territory, so he decided to run, to avoid getting caught. Even though the man asked him to stop and show him his ID, Jiaka ran as fast as he could and saw the exit he was looking for. As he ran, he thought that he didn't want to go back to the warehouse and that if he was caught, he would see his first mother again and get scolded. So he ran as fast as he could. As the swordsman chased him, he noticed that the exit door was closing, so he set out to slip out so he could escape. And as he left, he continued running to avoid being caught. Jiaka finds himself in a forest, far from the village, and realizes that he is hungry. He looks for food in the forest, but only sees some mushrooms that look very nice, and he thinks they will not harm him. Although he is afraid of eating something that might be poisonous, he has no choice and eats them. Later, the boy realizes that it was a mistake to eat the mushrooms, because he has an upset stomach and feels like he might faint and sees everything blurry. He feels so bad that he faints alone in the forest. Later that morning, some men are walking through the forest and see him on the ground and think he is dead, but they see him barely open his eyes. One of them thinks it's better to leave him there, because he's almost dead, but the other thinks they can take him with them, and it might benefit them later. After some hesitation about taking him with them, they think it is not wrong to help him and take him away. When Jiaka manages to fully wake up from his blackout, he thinks he sees a fairy, but it was actually one of the men who rescued him, and upon seeing him wake up, told him that they found him passed out on a mountain and rescued him from being eaten by the mountain animals. Jiaka thanks him and asks him where they are, and he tells him that in the hideout of Wufeng Mountain, because they are bandits. One by one, the 6 men introduce themselves and tell the boy that they are brothers and that to pay for saving his life, he must work for them, and they offer him bread. Jiaka sees the bread and thinks he should not eat it, so he tells them he is not hungry, but they know he is lying, because his stomach was rumbling while he was asleep, and they discuss among themselves what chores he can do and realize that he talks like a child, despite his age. Finally, one of them, called Hyungnam, takes the boy to teach him the tasks he must do, but as he takes him pulling his suit and then he drops him on the ground, Jiaka thinks he is going to hurt him and tries to protect himself with his hands, but Hyungnam tells him that he will not hurt him and that he is not in conditions to look for wild vegetables. The boy is hesitant, but Hyungnam explained what he would do to help them. Jiaka listened attentively but continued to refuse to join them. Listening to him, Hyungnam tells him that he needs to change his life and stop being ignored by others, otherwise he will starve to death. He then shows him Mount Wufeng, telling him that if he becomes one of them, he will be their 7th brother and will rule together with them the 5 peaks of the mountain. After talking with Hyungnam, Jiaka felt excited and left behind his tragic life before arriving to that place, where he would help his new brothers with the household chores while he recovered, and then they would teach him martial arts. He was starting a new life. Time passed and Jiaka managed to learn to survive and adapt to his new life in Wufeng Mountain, enjoying every day with his new brothers and feeling happy for the first time. But all that was about to change. One day, the new brothers of Jiaka sought to join the Union of Bandits, a chaotic sect led by a monster man, who called himself the Blade of the Union of Bandits and whose fame became bigger and bigger, becoming known as the Demon Destroyer of the Heavens. The fame of this man made all the chaotic sects and bandits want to join him, and after accepting them, he made the Bandit Union very powerful. To achieve this, the bandits of Mount Wufeng sought out 2 of the vice leaders of the Bandit Union, Yom Sang-cheol and Lee Young-an, and asked them to join their group. But they, upon seeing them, only scoffed, saying that they looked like beggars and that they needed at least 10 members to be able to act as a fighting force, because the groups of merchants passing around that area were very large. Hearing these words, Jiaka started to get annoyed, but noticed that the 2 men decided to talk alone, and finally, after a while they decided to accept them, on the condition that they would gather 10 members before winter and that they would avoid tarnishing the dignity of the Bandit Union. The 2 men actually either believed in the capabilities of the small group of men, but they needed to fulfill the quota of affiliated groups and guarantee a hideout in the mountains, to avoid being punished by their leader, and hope that the new group would yield their hideout to them after being eliminated before 2 months by the nearby merchant groups. The bandits of Mount Wufeng bid farewell to their new leaders excitedly and celebrated, not knowing that most of the merchant groups paid passage fees only by raising the flag of the Bandit Union. After celebrating, the group decided to get ready to start their work in the bandit union and left Gyaka, the little guy, in charge of the house chores. The boy, although a little annoyed, was convinced that what he had to do was an important part of the job, and he performed his daily tasks faster and faster, until, after 3 months together with his new brothers, one day, he finished the tasks faster and felt that he had to do something while his companions, the Hyung Nims, returned. After thinking for a while, he decided to remember what he had learned in the warehouse and prepare himself for when his companions asked him to join the group. One day, the 3 new members of the group arrived. 2 men, Chol-san, Ki-duk, and a girl, Han Ki-yeon. The Hyung Nims welcomed them and gave Gyaka permission to join the group during the trips to the mountain, because now, Ki-yeon could take care of the house chores. The boy was very excited. But when assigning the order of the 3 new brothers, one of them, Chol-san, thought he didn't want to be Gyaka's younger brother and challenged him to a fight. If Chol-san beat him, he would take his place as the 7th brother and Gyaka would now be the 8th brother. He had to fight to keep his place in the group. The Hyung Nims encourage Gyaka and he feels he must fight, so that his brothers will take him to the mountain with them. Suddenly, Chol-san apologizes to the boy and gives him a punch that knocks him to the ground. There, Gyaka thinks that he has no weapons to defend himself, but he doesn't plan to give up, because that's not what he learned in the warehouse. Still on the ground, Chol-san keeps hitting him and the boy asks him why he hits him so much. But Chol-san just tells him to stay on the ground if he doesn't want him to hurt him. After a while, Chol-san gets up and leaves Gyaka on the ground to claim his place as the 7th brother. But the boy stands up, gets on his guard and tells him that he will not allow it. Gyaka has stood up and asks Chol-san to finish what they started. Chol-san was astonished to see the boy standing up after beating him so badly. But the Kai of the 9 Heavens had awakened in Gyaka, and although he didn't know how to use his power, he decided to use his fist as a sword and hit Chol-san's chest hard, leaving him passed out on the ground. To everyone's astonishment, after the fight, everyone decided that the young Gyaka was still the 7th brother, and his older brother decided to give him a sword to reward his incredible fight, and also, they told him that from the next day, he would join them in the trips to the mountain. The boy was happy and told his brothers that he would work hard not to disappoint them. Upon hearing this, one of his older brothers, Tak Hyung Nim, gave him a piece of advice: fist fights and sword fights are different, and if you let your desires consume you, without realizing it, you will be cut with a sword. Tak Hyung Nim continued to talk to Gyaka and decided to teach him his exorcism sword technique that afternoon. The next day, a large group of merchants were passing by a road near the mountain, and one of them commented that he had a bad feeling. But another man, named Kang Mu-deok, told him that he should not be afraid because he was known to everyone as the lightning sword and would protect him. While they were talking, an arrow hit them and Kang Mu-deok could hardly reach it. They all turned to the place where the arrow came from, and there, they saw the bandits of Mount Wufeng, who introduced themselves to them as members of the bandit union. Kang Mu-deok thought they were underestimating them and mocked them, because he thought they were low-level robbers, causing the group to start their arrow attack against the merchant caravan. But Kang Mu-deok, just by swinging the sword, stopped all the arrows. Seeing that Kang Mu-deok stopped his attack, the bandits of Mount Wufeng look at each other in amazement, trying to decide what they should do to avoid dying at the hands of that man and his warriors. But while they were planning their strategy, young Gyaka rushed forward to confront Kang Mu-deok and his warriors, warning them that no one could make fun of his brothers. The bandits of Mount Wufeng looked at their 7th brother in amazement and thought to stop him. But he was very close to Kang Mu-deok and decided to challenge him. Kang Mu-deok thought the boy was a little foolish for challenging him and that it would be easy to beat him. But when he raised his sword to attack him, with one move, the boy broke his sword. Everyone was astonished and there was silence for a while, until Gyaka asked Kang Mu-deok if it was over, because he wanted to attack him. The man, astonished, only thought of asking his opponent to let him look for a new weapon, and the boy agreed, asking him to take a stronger weapon, because his sword was very weak. It had broken very easily. Kang Mu-deok thought how strong the boy must be, because he had been able to attack him quickly at the last moment and without him being able to notice. He thought that if at that age, he could master his sword so well, he must be very strong, and with a pleading look, he decided to surrender and pay the toll to the bandits. The bandits of Mount Wufeng took their loot and returned home. On the way, the first brother approached Gyaka and asked him what he had done during the raid on the merchants, and the boy smilingly told him that he had only cut the man's sword, using the technique that the second brother had taught him a few days ago. Hyungnam, the first brother, thought it was amazing that the boy accomplished so much with so little training and asked him to teach him the demon-killing blade technique he had recently learned. Gyaka looked at him smiling and said yes and excitedly showed them the technique, which all his brothers watched in amazement. Young Gyaka went out on patrol with his brothers from autumn to winter, but none of the merchants' escort warriors were able to withstand their attack. making a name for themselves. The fame of the Mount Wufeng bandits brought 15 new boys to their shelter in a short time, and only 3 months later, they had become a great fortress and began to make a name for themselves in Henan province. But some of the new members had other plans. They thought that by eliminating number 7, to wipe out the group. One of them, number 26, went to talk to a man from the Orthodox Alliance, who wanted to wipe out the bandits of Mount Wufeng, to tell him about the first 2 brothers and Jiaka, and after listening to him, the man was convinced that the boy would be no match for the Northern Sword of Gumil, a very famous martial arts master. Later that day, Jiaka was standing next to his sister Han Ki-yeon, and she asked him if he knew that some of his comrades wanted to hold a rank fight. Jiaka, while helping her with household chores, told her that if he knew, he had heard about it only a brief time ago. The girl continued to ask him to punish them, because she had heard them teasing the older brother. Truly angry, Jiaka broke the table on which he was chopping the meat and went out at once to put them in their place. His 4th brother, Hyo-im-dao, saw him angrily about to look for the new ones and asked him what was wrong. Jiaka explained, and his 4th brother told him that the first brother was worried that he might hurt the newcomers, and that seeing him at that moment, he was worried too. Hyo-im-dao explained to the boy to take things calmly, because at the end of the winter, they needed to have all the members of the group and they needed to be healthy to be able to help in the activities of their fortress. After chatting with Jiaka, his 4th brother, he asked him to come inside the house, because it was very cold. The next day, the first brother called them all together to talk about the rank fight, in number 26, along with 2 other men, said they wanted to do the fight. The first brother explained the dynamics. From rank 7 onwards, they could fight the battles necessary to occupy the rank they wanted in. After explaining, he asked them what place they wanted to occupy. One of them, the oldest, told him very convincingly that they wanted to fight for the number 1 place, because they believed that he did not deserve to occupy that place and that they had greater strength and experience than he did. The first 6 brothers were very angry about the offenses to their first brother, but he told them to calm down and, looking at the challengers, reminded them of the dynamics of the day. When he finished speaking, he called Jiaka to start the challenges, but one of them just made fun, saying that they had too much faith in that boy. Jiaka was very angry and that activated his Kai. He saw the challengers and approached them with such force that he seemed to be on fire, and asked them who wanted to be the first to fight him. Jiaka stood in front of the challengers and asked them who wants to go first. Number 26, a little frightened, looked at his 2 elderly companions and asked them what should they do now. They tried to motivate him so that on his own, he would offer to fight, but he refused, saying that he felt the boy was dangerous and did not want to fight first. But when he got careless, the elders pushed him to the front and told Jiaka that he would go first. Number 26 thought he was in trouble and the best way to get out of it was to ask to fight with his hands only. Young Jiaka agreed, and when number 26 wanted to hit him, the boy hit him so hard that he sent him far away. Jiaka looked at the elders and asked who would be next, and Yeom Sewum, a bald man who was part of the group of challengers, raised his voice and proposed to fight him with his fists as well, but he also suffered the same fate. Then, another challenger appeared, Hwang Yamyang, but he asked to fight with weapons, and although he used them, he was also defeated. Jiaka looked at the rest and asked for the next one to go through, but the 2 elders, still amazed at how quickly the boy defeated the other 3, looked at him and asked for more time, saying they could not agree on which of the 2 was better qualified to be next. But the boy told him that it did not matter. He would be next. The man opened his eyes when he heard the boy and felt he should take out his special weapon for fighting, a fan, and before starting he introduced himself. I am Beek Jio, and I will not use swords against someone who is in the same fortress. The boy agreed, and when they were about to fight, the man used the fan, whose power was to turn him into a famous demon of Henan province. Jiaka realized that the fan allowed the man to attack him and that fighting under those conditions would not be easy, so he asked the man if he knew what a fair fight was, and when Beek Jio stopped his attack to listen to him, he hit him and knocked him to the ground. The last challenger was very astonished at the ease with which that boy had defeated Beek Jio and asked him to wait, that he had no intention of continuing, and the boy warned him that if he dared to mess with his brothers, he was going to die. The man felt bad about having to serve men so inferior to him, but ended up saying yes. To avoid the fight, Jiaka was invited by his brothers to a meal to celebrate the victory. In a nearby village, the town of Hejia, where the Nanyang Merchants Union was located, a man can be seen running to see his master, Lee Muryeong. Seeing him, very worried, he said to him, "Master, what we feared is true. 2 of the great demons of Henan province were seen in the 5 Peaks fortress." The master looked at the man as he sipped his tea and asked him if he knew which of them was the new bandit chief of Mount Wufeng, who was already famous for attacking many merchant groups in the area. To his surprise, the man told him that things were still the same and that the chief of the fortress was still Poon Yeoncho, who uses the heaven and earth blade technique. The man could not get over his astonishment. He thought the information must be wrong. After a moment, the visitor told him that he believed that the five-peak fortress was becoming a great threat, because the two demons were part of the group, which already had 30 members. The master was actually one of the 3 demons of Henan province and was annoyed that the other 2 were considered equal to him. After listening to his visitor, he told him that it was time to put an end to the bandits living in the Five Peaks fortress and that he would be the one to finish them off, because he had 3 times as many men to deal with them. In the fortress of the 7 peaks, the night of that day, the young Jaka is cleaning his sword, when one of his brothers brings him water and congratulates him for defeating one of the 3 demons of the province of Henan, and tells him a popular belief that tells that the great masters can cut people only with a blade. The boy thought about his brother's words and found it incredible. If that was true, he needed to improve his technique and wanted to meet someone who could master it. A while later, still in the night, one of the brothers of the fortress who was watching began to shout in desperation that they were under attack. They were sending fire arrows to the fortress. Gyaka, seeing the arrows, was upset and some of his brothers were scared and upset. The first brother asked them to calm down and get ready to fight it. After thinking for a while, he asked them not to all go out, to get to safety, while they were building a second wall and ordered a group to hurry up and build it. On the other side of the wall stood the 3rd demon of Henan province, hoping to catch them easily with the fire arrows, but seeing that none of them came out, he thought that by destroying the walls, they could enter. After his warriors knocked down the main wall, they were ready to enter the fortress, but, to their astonishment, there was a new wall. The warriors complained that they could not break down the new wall and their leader told them not to worry and pulled out an axe. Inside the fortress, one of Gyaka's brothers saw what was happening outside and told them that the man was approaching with the axe. One of the 2 demons inside the fortress identified the man with the axe as the heavenly swordsman Li Muryong, and told everyone that the attackers were from the Nanyang Merchant Syndicate. Gyaka heard what the old man said and asked if they had the leader of the group in front of them and approached the wall. At that moment, the demon Li Muryong, angry at feeling aggrieved by the members of the fortress, destroyed the new wall with his axe and met Gyaka head-on, who immediately confronted him. Li Muryong was astonished that such a young man would confront him, and the boy only told him that he was angry that he had attacked his house. Li Muryong comes face to face with Gyaka and the boy asks him why, if his warriors outnumber them. They attacked his house with fire arrows and Li Muryong tells him that this attack is known as the fire attack strategy. Gyaka again talks to the man and asks him to repair the damage he caused them. Li Muryong did not believe his ears and, looking at the boy, told him that he did not intend to repair the damage, because he was there to punish them for assaulting the merchants of Henan province. Li Muryong was indignant, because the boy told him that they had not assaulted anyone. They only collected tolls to pass through their land and told him that he would punish him for making him angry. Gyaka saw him and asked him why they did not fight them, and the man, even more annoyed, drew his sword and told him that he was going to teach him to respect him. Gyaka told him to do whatever he wanted, and Li Muryong replied that even though he was a child, he would not let his guard down. Gyaka was pleased with this answer from Li Muryong and told him that he hoped this fight would be interesting. After speaking, Li Muryong raised his sword and after shouting very loudly, he attacked Gyaka. The boy watched as his opponent seemed to attack him several times in different positions. While invoking the technique called Motionless Noon and pleased by what he saw, he blocked the attack with his sword. Li Muryong did not believe his eyes. That boy had blocked his attack and his technique was the martial art of the MANHUA sect and could not be blocked by a simple bandit. After a moment, Li Muryong saw his opponent and asked him where he was from and what was the technique he had used. Gyaka told him that he really had nothing like that and that the martial art he had done was the demon blade technique taught to him personally by his second brother. Li Muryong tells the boy that this technique is only taught in temples and Gyaka proudly tells him that his technique wasn't bad either, because so far, no one had ever withstood more than one move when facing him. Excited, he tells him that he enjoyed watching his technique and asks him if he can imitate it. But Li Muryong, upon hearing him, gets angry and tells him that the technique is extremely complicated and that he doesn't think he can learn it easily. After listening to Li Muryong, Gyaka was encouraged to imitate the technique and left everyone impressed, because it was perfect on the first try. Li Muryong remembered all the effort it took to learn the technique and found it unbelievable that this boy could imitate it just by seeing it once. While he was thinking how to attack Gyaka during his demonstration, he felt the boy hurt him with his own technique and fell to the ground. Gyaka disappointedly asked him why he had fallen to the ground before he finished the technique, and the man, who could barely move, promised him that he would no longer return to the five-peaked fortress, but to spare his life, and the boy agreed. Gyaka, before letting him go, made him promise to keep his promise to stay away, and after watching them leave, he went back to feast with his brothers. In the fortress, while all this was going on, no one noticed that an unknown man had seen everything from a mountain near the fortress. In the hall of the Mansu Merchants Union, There are several men talking about the current situation of the merchant unions in the area, and one of them says, the leader, Sang Muchen, says, the 3 largest merchant unions in Henan province fell one by one into the hands of a young man, and this rumor has been spreading to the bandits in Hejia town. All this means that the 5 Peaks Fortress will continue to gain new warriors, and before that happens, we need to beat them. As his companions looked at him, the man continued, I am worried that the young bandit who has defeated all the merchants in the area is a disciple of the chief commander of the Green Forest, the Demon Lord Sky Destroyer. Another man who was in the room agreed with Sang Muchen and, with a bit of fear, further said that the boy had appeared just when the sky-destroying Demon Lord was trying to expand, and that he believed that if that was true, they should stay away from him. Sang Muchen was very angry to hear his companion, and with one blow he smashed the table, shouting at him that how could he think of saying that they should run away from the bandits. If they did that, their organization, the Manzo Merchants Union, would be the mockery of everyone and they would have no future. Another of the men in the room asked Sang Muchen what they should do then, and then he told him that he believed their martial arts level was equal to that of the Heavenly Swordsman, and if so, in what way did he think they could deal with that boy? The man thought for a while and confessed to his companions that he did not know how to keep the boy under control, because he had already sent his men to investigate him and had found, by watching the boy's fight with Li Meryang, that he was very strong. Sang Muchen was confused about what he should do, and after a while, he told his companions that he should urgently go to Huguang province, because there is the Wuding sect, one of the 10 great sects, where he learned martial arts, and his master can help him to get one of the best warriors to help them fight the bandits of the 5 Peaks Fortress. In the best restaurant in Hejia town, 2 of the sisters of the 5 Peaks Fortress were standing next to Jiaka, ordering a lot of food and wearing new clothes for the first time. It seemed to Jiaka that they were spending a lot of money, but her companions told her to enjoy herself, because her second brother wanted her to eat and dress well. Jiaka looked at her new sister and asked who she was, and she told her that her name was Ha Sobik and that she had only joined the fortress a week ago. The other girl told Jiaka that Ha Sobik was famous because she had run away from an extremely dangerous man who threatened her to marry him. The girl, a little embarrassed, looked at Jiaka and told him that what her sister said was true, and suddenly a noticeably big man greeted her with a big smile and told her that he was worried about her. He was just the man she had run away from before. The man tried to take the girl away and Jiaka told him to leave her alone. The man told them that they didn't know who they were messing with, that his name was Guak Yongchul and that he was very famous in those lands. But the other girl told him that she better run away, so Jiaka would spare her life and the boy. The man did not pay attention, and only before Jiaka finished counting, he found out who he was. But it was too late. The boy knocked him down with one blow, and while doing so, a man who was passing by, the sage Chung Jai, from the Wuding sect, came closer to take a closer look at the boy. Sage Chung Jai is walking through the streets of Hejia town and his disciple, Sang Muchen, follows him. Sang Muchen is worried about his master's safety because he believes that the streets of the village are not safe, and is curious because his master personally went to meet the boy who was causing them so much trouble. While walking behind his master, he hears the people of the village commenting on the arrival of the sage and gets a little angry. But his master tells him that he needs to pay attention to more important things and that he thinks he should train a little more, which he can do after solving the problem they have in Henan province. The 2 men moved forward a little when suddenly they see a man flying out of a restaurant, and behind him, the young Jiaka. The sage did not know who the young man was, but his disciple told him who he was. Jiaka also saw the sage and realized the great energy that surrounded him, but he could not approach him, because his sisters in the fortress were worried about the damage they had caused in the restaurant, and because with one blow, he had broken the table and they had been left without food that day, because he had to pay for the damage with what they had. Jiaka felt bad about damaging the lunch and apologized to her sisters. The girls accepted on the condition that he teach them martial arts. Nearby, the sage and his disciple are talking about young Jiaka. Sang Muchen asked his master why he didn't attack the boy when he saw him, and the sage was only interested to know about the rumors about that young man. And, after thinking a little, he told Sang Muchen that he didn't believe that Jiaka was a disciple of the Demon Lord Sky Destroyer because the young man was too talented to hide it. The sage is very happy to discover a talented young man in that province. A few days earlier, at Wuding Mountain, home of the sage Chung Jai, his disciple, Sang Muchen, arrives for a visit and brings him a beautiful gift, Longjing tea, a very difficult tea to find, and his master knows it. When Sang Muchen comes to see him, the sage asks him if he needs his help, and Sang Muchen explains the problems the merchants of Henan province have been having with the 5-peaked bandits and asks him to help him keep them under control. They both recall the trouble years ago with the Moon Fairy of the demon cult and how the Sword Emperor and the moon swordsman prevented the fairy from taking over Murim. Sang Muchun thinks that may happen again if those bandits are not controlled and asks his master to send some of his warriors to help them. Sage Chungjai agrees with Sang Muchun and believes that helping Henan province will be good for the Wuding sect, so he decides to do it personally and tells Chungjai that he has not left his home for a long time, and that day he saw fortune in his destiny, and believes that Sang Muchun's proposal may be good for him. The sage believes that making the young Jiaka his disciple may be a good decision. At the Five Peaks Fortress, one of Jiaka's brothers tells the elder brother that they have finished the construction of the Harmony Pavilion, a large and beautiful building made with the help of carpenters, counselors, and their families who had recently joined the fortress. The children of the fortress were excited and ran to see the new house, while the first brother thought about how happy he was to see them and commented with the second brother. While they were talking, another brother asked them about Jiaka and ran to join the training the boy was doing that day with his two sisters. Nearby, in the forest, the girls are a little worried because they think they are not going to be able to achieve the breathing exercise that young Jiaka is teaching them, because he told them that they should memorize 300 words and they think that is a lot, but Jiaka tells them that little by little they can achieve it. After that, the three boys decide to start meditating. The girls finished meditating and wanted to talk to Jiaka, but they saw him very concentrated and let him finish meditating. During his meditation, Jiaka saw his reflection in the mirror and felt that the movements he was making were the same as those of his reflection. He felt that they were one and he liked that very much. Jiaka's joy made his energy grow and the girls saw that and were very impressed. When the young man woke up, the girls told him what they saw and asked him if that was going to happen to them if they continued training. Jiaka didn't understand what they were saying, but he thought it might motivate them and suggested they practice more. When they returned to the fortress, they all wanted to see if the Harmony Pavilion was finished, but they realized that the fortress was empty and Jiaka asked what was wrong. And his elder brother tells him that they heard that a great master, the sage Chungjai, was going to attack the fortress and, for their safety, they had all left. The first brother told him that when the news reached them, he had asked Yonggak for advice, but the demon only spoke of how powerful the sage was and how important it was to save themselves from death, and for that reason, they should flee quickly to avoid being in the fortress when the sage Chungjai arrived. Thanks to that, everyone had left and only the first 7 brothers and sisters were left, and together with them, Cholson and the 2 girls. The girls, who had been training with Jiaka, were frightened by the news, but they decided to stay in the fortress and the young man, too. Jiaka had only one doubt: would this sage be powerful enough to kill someone with a blade? The older brother listened carefully to Jiaka's question and replied to the boy that he did not believe that the sage Chungjai was powerful enough to kill someone with a blade. Jiaka thinks that then, it is possible to fight against that man, and that gives an idea to his older brother. Jiaka could leave the sage out of combat for a moment, and they could take advantage to attack him in group, which was a good alternative to beat the sage. Although that was a good idea, he didn't know if it was good to put the young ones in danger. After thinking for a moment, the elder brother told them all that he did not want to put them in danger, and that he was officially disbanding the Five Peaks Fortress. Later that night, the eldest brother was standing in front of the fortress wall, and thinking that he did not want to leave, when the second brother told him that they had all stayed, because, like him, they wanted to protect the fortress, and if they were going to die, they wanted to be together. Together they build a second wall and cook something for dinner. During dinner they agree to keep watch and warn when they are attacked, and the older brother tells them that he is happy to have his brothers. A little later, Kiyon proposes to the older brother to include her, Cholson, and Sobik in his sworn family, and he, after asking them all if they agree, smiles and accepts, assigning Cholson number 8, Kiyon number 9, and Sobik number 10. During his shift on guard duty, the older brother, Pung Yoncho, sees Jiaka awake, and after talking a bit, they both decide to do a practice to exercise while their enemies arrive. During the practice, they realize they have a visitor and peek over the wall. At that moment, Jiaka notices his boss's concern and decides to go ahead and challenge him to a fight. When he sees his opponents, he taunts Sang Muchun, telling him that he is a coward, and instead of facing them by himself, he decided to go and beg for help. He also tells them that they are not afraid of them. Pung Yoncho also approached and realized that they were many, but he was no longer afraid. He felt obliged to die for his brothers that day. Sang Muchun, seeing that Pung Yoncho has gone out with Jiaka, realizes that he is the leader of the group and tells him to surrender the fortress at once to avoid hurting them. But Jiaka does not agree and again asks to face the sage, and at once they start to fight. During the fight, the two realize each other's power and Gyaka enjoys facing a powerful opponent who allows him to fight for more than 2 moves. For his part, the sage analyzes the boy's behavior, sees his strength, and realizes that his desire is to protect his boss. Gyaka and the sage continue to fight, and the sage is amazed to see the boy's skill with the sword but is annoyed by his cocky attitude and tells him so. Gyaka replies that he is not cocky and asks him if he has seen him before, because he thinks he has felt his energy and he doesn't think he is good enough to defeat him. Gyaka continues speaking and asks the sage if he is able to cut someone with a blade. The sage, listening to him, just laughs and tells him that he thinks he is an interesting guy, but insists that he is conceited and that this fight is his chance to prove his skills. The sage tells him about his experience and tells him that he has seen many warriors with good skills, but he has defeated them all and believes that Gyaka is going to lose too. During the fight, Pungyoncho, the eldest brother, asks the second brother how he thinks they are doing, and he replies that they are fighting as equals. At that moment, the sage throws an attack at the boy and challenges him to dodge it. Gyaka moves quickly and avoids the blow, which makes the sage understand that the boy is very strong and takes the opportunity to ask him who is his master and tells him that he feels very good to fight with him, and that he believes he has the skills to learn the advanced techniques of the Wudang sect. Gyaka does not know the techniques that the sage tells him about, but, a little incredulous, tells him that he does not need them, and the sage replies that, from now on, he is going to need them and prepares to perform an advanced technique. Sangmuchan immediately realizes what the technique is, the Taiji Mystic Sword technique. Gyaka realizes that the sage's movement is extremely fast, and although he tries to defend himself, he feels that he has wounded him in the arm. But he does not see it. Behind him, he hears the voice of the sage Chungjai and feels that he cannot dodge his attack. Suddenly, his 2 brothers shout at him to watch out for the sage's new attack. But again, the sage wounds him and Gyaka falls. But the sage tells him to get up, because they are not finished yet, and prepares a new move. All his brothers believe that this is the end of Gyaka and look at him in anguish. But when the sage finishes his technique, he looks proudly at his rival and with astonishment, the figure of a giant dragon appears before him. Far away, in the Yon clan fortress, Gyaka's first mother is very happy, because her eldest son is about to demonstrate to the clan elders his skills. Mubik, who reached 7 stars during his training with the Nangong clan, was not yet at the level of his late father, but he was proud of his skills and performed a few moves in front of everyone to show them his progress, finishing with an impressive move, the Blessed Dragon Tearing Claw, making a great impression on the elders. Again, in the Fortress of the 5 Peaks, everyone is amazed by the figure of the great dragon that can be seen in front of the sage, and they recognize that the technique performed by Gyaka is the Blessed Dragon Ripping Claw, which has left a very large mark on the ground. Gyaka is a little upset because he believes that the sage has been hiding his powers from him and asks him to fight with all his power. The sage listens to him but decides to end the fight once and for all. He thinks it is time to defeat the boy and launches a new attack. Gyaka was already prepared to face him, and, after a couple of moves, the sage realizes that he has no more energy and launches his final blow, but Gyaka responds with great skill and wounds him severely. The sage, still impressed by Gyaka's skills, asks him to repeat his name, and the young man repeats it and explains that his name means sunset. The sage smiles and then falls to the ground. Sangmuchan watches in fear and amazement as his master falls to the ground and Gyaka stands in front of him. Gyaka's brothers are impressed and celebrate the victory with immense joy. Gyaka's older brother lifted him up in his arms and the bandits of the 5 Peaks went to celebrate their victory, to the astonished look of Sangmuchan and his warriors. Sangmuchan approaches his master and asks him to go to be treated, because he is badly wounded. The sage Chungjai sees his disciple in pain, but very happy, because that day he had seen the heavens above the heavens. He continued telling Sangmuchan that it was not possible to punish the bandits of the 5 Peaks, because that boy was very strong and that he would suffer if he faced him. Days passed, and although Sangmuchan tried to avoid it, the rumor spread that Sage Chungjai had been defeated by the 5-peaked bandits. In a cafe in Henan province, some men are discussing this rumor, some are convinced, and others have many doubts. One of them talks about Gyaka and says that the boy is very strong and that thanks to him, they were able to defeat the sage, but another says that they might have been mistaken and the man they defeated was not the sage. At another table, there was a man who interrupted the conversation of the others, saying that he believed that Gyaka could have beaten the sage of the Wudang sect. The men turned to look at him, and when asked why, he said that he replied that he had faced the boy and defeated him. The man was the demon Li Muryong, and then, introducing himself, he told the men that the boy's moves were very good and that he did not know if there was anyone who could beat him. Other men who heard Li Meryong approached the group and confessed to having been defeated by the boy as well. After that day, everyone knew that there was no one capable of fighting against the five-peaked fortress and its 10 heroes. Nearby, there were some leaders of the bandit union commenting on the rumors, a little astonished, because 2 of them had visited them and remembered that they were only 7 and that they had accepted them, on the condition that they would reach at least 10. One of the leaders believed that they did not deserve to be part of the Green Forest organization and decided that he would go to visit them. At the Fortress of the Five Peaks, the 10 heroes were welcoming back all those who had left. One of them knelt down to ask for forgiveness and thought he would be beaten by the chief, but he just smiled and hugged him. Behind the chief was the second brother, who believed that he had forgiven them very easily, but the older brother believed that they needed the support of as many warriors as they could, because the other bandit strongholds in the Green Forest might attack them, believing that they were not worthy to be part of them. Gamyeong, the second brother, thought a little about what his boss told him and remembered that no one from the Green Forest had come to help them when the sage Chung Jai attacked them. Poong Yeoncho reminded his brother that soon there would be a Green Forest summit and that, to be recognized as part of them, they should participate and show their skills, also saying that, when they had to go, they needed people to protect their fortress, so they should accept everyone, and Gamyeong understood his boss. Poong Yeoncho continued to ask his brother about Jiaka, and he told him that the boy had gone to the forest to look for the sage. In the forest, the sage was meditating when he received a message brought by a pigeon, and as he was reading it, Jiaka approached him. In the message he said that he should return quickly to his sect, because his absence would mean a bad example for the young people. Jiaka, a little angry, asked the sage if he would return to his sect, and the sage looked at him with a smile. Sage Chung Jai stands in the forest in front of Jiaka and, smiling, says to him, "Back, it has been a long time since I have taken a break, so I'm thinking of enjoying this experience before I go back." The boy did not understand what the sage was telling him and thought he might attack them again. But the sage noticed his concern and explained that he wanted to train alone, to improve his technique of the mystic sword of Taiji, because, although he had learned it 30 years ago, he had failed to overcome the limits of the last 3 movements. Jiaka looks at him with more curiosity and asks what are those last 3 movements, and the sage replies that he wants to learn from him. Jiaka is amazed by what he heard but warns the sage that he cannot teach him the technique of his fortress, the demon-killing blade, because it was taught to him by his brother Gamyeong. The sage thought a bit about what the boy told him and replied that although he wanted to learn the technique, he didn't need it. What he wanted was to learn from Jiaka while he trained. Jiaka, listening to him, asked him if he thought it was necessary, and the sage said yes and that he could also win if he let him watch him, and at once he raised his fist and brought it quickly to Jiaka's face, breaking the bamboo plants behind him. Jiaka was amazed by the technique and asked him how he had done it. The sage smiled and told him that he could teach him, but he had one condition. He wanted Jiaka to advise him and he, in return, would tell him how to improve his technique, because, although he was already very strong, he had not yet been able to use the full power of his technique, and that was because, according to the sage, Jiaka had not learned the basic theories of martial arts, and, with that, his level would improve a lot. After making his proposal, the sage extended his hand to Jiaka and asked him if he would accept the deal. And so the 2 men trained together for several days. One day, when they were on their way to the five-peaked fortress, they met some children playing and the sage greeted them warmly. But Jiaka kept his distance and, as they walked away, asked the sage if he liked children, because he did not want them. The sage asked him why he didn't like children, if they were so young and innocent, and Jiaka replied that he didn't know what he was saying, because children played pranks and harassed people, as he recalled his first mother's children and his life before he came to the five-peaked fortress. After some thought, Jiaka added that, in the five-peaked fortress, everything was better because everyone was kind, regardless of their age. The sage listened carefully to Jiaka and said that he also did not imagine that in a green forest fortress, people would be so kind. Jiaka thought that place was no more than any other place to live, and he did not think there was much difference and told the sage so. Chung Jai, hearing this, thought he had always been wrong about people living in fortresses and smiled. Jiaka and the sage parted, and when the sage was already approaching the fortress, he saw Ki-yeon picking up some pieces of wood to take them to the house and decided to help her. Ki-yeon felt uncomfortable and told the sage that she found him a strange man, because the elders she had met were not kind, nor did they help the young people. On the contrary, the young people were supposed to take care of them. Chung Jai, after listening to her, told her that he also had some prejudices against the mountain bandits and that, at least, in the Five Peaks Fortress, he had seen good things. He believed it was a good place. The girl understood immediately what the wise man was saying and answered that in the other fortresses there were only thieves and that in this one there were people who had fled because it was hard to make a living and she was there because they had wanted to sell her. But she felt protected there. The chief only wanted to help those who came to the fortress of the Five Peaks and Jiaka always protected them all. The sage wanted to know how Jiaka had come to that place, so he asked Kiyon, and the girl told him that she did not know details, but she had been told that the chief had saved Jiaka from dying and had taken him to the fortress. The sage, listening to her, understood the boy's need to risk his life to protect them and told the girl that he believed Jiaka saw them all as his family. As they spoke, the girl and the sage continued on their way. Elsewhere, the lunar fairy was rewarding one of her warriors for becoming a great demon general, and after rewarding him, she told her warriors that she believed that, after 20 years of being defeated, the time was near when she would defeat them all and see them all at her feet. In Hejia's restaurant, 5 men are sitting, ordering food and talking about the Five Peaks Fortress. They believe that the comments about the latest victories of that group of bandits are exaggerated, and that it has given the fortress an undeserved fame. One of them, Yonggak, believed that Jiaka should have been defeated by now and that there should be no one in the fortress, but that they were still there and all those who had abandoned them, except the 5 of them, were there again. A little annoyed, he thought that with that last victory, his last hope of becoming the chief of the fortress had been lost. One of the 5 men is curious about what they should do because they think they can be accepted back, like the others, but they could no longer occupy high positions, as they had planned, because Jiaka was not defeated. Another man says that he would rather go back to the Five Peaks Fortress than try going to the Crimson Wind Fortress. The man believes that if they say they left to protect the fortress, they will accept them easily, but Yonggak believes that Jiaka will not allow them to return. After eating, Yonggak decides to go to the fortress to find out if they can accept him, and when he arrives, he sees everyone staring at him and hears them muttering about his group. How could they be there if they had been the first to leave the fortress? The group heard the comments and told their leader that the people didn't see them well and that made them uncomfortable. Yonggak, seeing his companion, tells him not to worry, that the opinion of others does not matter, they should only care about what the chief of the fortress says, and that they would tell him that they had not really left the fortress. Already very close to the fortress wall, one of them believes that they have tried to sew right in front of the wall, because of the big marks on the ground. But Yonggak tells him that it is not so, that those marks were made by a martial arts technique and that he believes that only Jiaka could have made them, but that it is not a mark left by his technique. As the 5 men advance, he realizes who they are and asks them what are they doing there. Yonggak hears him and gets annoyed but realizes that the one talking to him is Cholson, who tells them that he is now their superior. Poong Yoncho is in the Harmony Pavilion when one of his brothers announces the visit of the 5 men. Poong Yoncho thinks about what they tell him and believes that he should be received. But the second brother tells him that they should not accept him because he was the first to leave and tell them all to leave the fortress. Poong Yoncho acknowledges that the man had caused a lot of commotion that day but believes that he is very powerful and that someone like him can be of help in the fortress. While Poong Yoncho and the second brother decide if they should accept Yonggak back, he and Cholson are fighting outside, because the newcomer does not want to be inferior to Cholson. During the fight, Yonggak notices that his opponent has improved his technique a lot and Cholson tells him that it has been thanks to Jiaka's training him. Yonggak acknowledges his progress, but thinks he still cannot beat him and, after 2 moves, puts him on the ground and tells him he better stay there, so he will not hurt him. But the man doesn't want to be beaten by someone who ran away when he was needed and continues to fight. Yonggak prepares to make a lethal move, but he senses someone asking him to stop and just using 2 fingers, he immobilizes him. Yonggak wants to see who has stopped him and, astonished, he realizes that there is another person as strong as Jiaka, who advises him not to use such strong techniques inside the fortress. Cholson asks him to let them continue, but the sage sees him and tells him that he must learn to recognize the differences in ability, because that man was much stronger than him. Cholson is angry and claims the sage for intervening. But when he says his name, Yonggak realizes who he is and asks him directly if he is the sage Chung Jai of the Wudang sect, and the man says yes and introduces himself. Yonggak is very impressed and thinks about the rumors about the last victory of the fortress. The sage really had been defeated by Jiaka. A while later, Jiaka arrives and sees Yonggak. But upon greeting him, he only tells him that when he returns, he should be prepared for what is to come. Yonggak is very upset because Jiaka, upon seeing him, met him with a blow and hurt his arm. He just wants to take revenge on the boy for hitting him and tells himself that one day he will pay him back for that hit. Suddenly, he feels a great energy and, when he approaches to find out who is the owner of that energy, he realizes that it is the sage Chung Jai and Jiaka, who are training. Seeing this, Yonggak is amazed. He finds it incredible to see a duel between a sage of the Wudang sect and a simple bandit. The sage and Jiaka are fighting, and as they do so, they enjoy watching each other's moves and brag about their progress. Suddenly, the sage threw an impressive move, which pushed Jiaka hard and Yonggak thought he had defeated him. But to his surprise, the boy was on his feet and excited by that last move of the sage. Yonggak was impressed and thought the boy was indestructible, but he kept quietly watching. Jiaka, still excited, tells the sage that now he too will get serious in that fight, and the sage stands on guard to receive his attack. The boy tells him that he will no longer use the demon-killing blade technique to confront him and performs the second form of the art of the 9 heavens, the ultimate dragon ascension. Yongak does not believe what he is seeing. The boy split the heavens. At the end of his move, Gyaka is excited because he feels that the technique came out better than he expected, and the sage congratulates him for his breakthrough. He tells him that if he had hit him head on with that technique he would have turned into ashes, and that, as always, he had surprised him. Gyaka asks the sage not to congratulate him so much because he is very strong and knows that he has not shown him all his techniques. The sage smiles and tells him that he thinks he should not teach him anymore because he does not want to lose all the confidence he has worked so hard to build. After this, the sage extends his hand and says goodbye to the boy, thanking him for allowing him to gain so much enlightenment. Gyaka is a little upset because he was liking the way things were going and he wanted to continue, but the sage tells him that he thinks it is time to go back to his sect to defend his position as an elder, and that if he gets injured, he is going to have to stay longer. The boy understands and goes over to shake his hand. Sage Chungjai says goodbye, thanking everyone in the fortress for their kindness and tells him that he wants to return the favor in the future. The sage left satisfied that he had made great advances in the young Gyaka's technique and that he was able to advance his own technique. A few days later, the sage left the fortress very early, but a new visitor was about to arrive. This new man was very happy with the scenery of the mountain of the 5 peaks, and while drinking water, he thought he should protect himself from the beasts of the forest, when, suddenly, a huge bear appeared in front of him. This bear was a female, mother of 2 cubs that the man had killed a brief time before for crossing his path. When the bear attacked the man, he thought that the bear was a fool because he was the ruler of the Yin Wind, and after some thought, he developed a technique to confront the bear. The leader of the Demon Lord Part Heaven's hideout, named Seok Muhi, has been famous since he appeared in the martial arts world for not being defeated even once, but before he was famous, Seok Muhi used to be an employee of the Shaolin Temple. He wanted to learn martial arts, but as he did not want to be bald, and although he had great skills, his destiny was not to be a Buddhist. One day, Seok Muhi found a worn-out statue of Buddha in an abandoned warehouse of the Shaolin Temple and started to clean it very carefully, believing that he could learn martial arts if he cleaned it well. But while cleaning it, the statue broke, and inside it, Seok Muhi found an ancient book called Asura's Scriptures of Dark Heaven. Seok Muhi devoted himself to reading the ancient book and learning about it as he traveled around the country, and soon after, he became the leader of the Bandit Union hideout and caused chaos in the martial arts world. After a while, he chose the 12 best warriors as disciples and passed on the scriptures of Asura of Dark Heaven, causing fear everywhere, even in the 7 sects and the 2 schools. At the 5 Peaks Fortress, the warriors announced that a visitor had arrived from the Bandit Union. The man introduced himself as one of the direct disciples of the Demon Lord Heaven Part and asked for the chief of the fortress. The man's name was Seok Muhi, the Yin Wind sovereign of the 12 Demon Kings. After introducing himself, he asked everyone to come out at once to greet him. All the heroes of the 5 Peaks, except Gyaka, came out to greet him, and Seok Muhi notices that one of the top 10 warriors is missing and asks for him. The leader, Pung Yoncho, quickly replies that Gyaka is training alone and that is why they had not been able to call him. The visitor doesn't like the answer and hopes that they will be able to call him soon. While the others attend to Seok Muhi, some of the 10 heroes of the 5 Peaks whisper about Gyaka. He is not training, he is asleep, but the visitor cannot know because there could be trouble if he did not show respect to the sage of the Wudang sect. Much less was he going to respect a disciple of the Bandit Union, and that could end badly with a fight between Gyaka and the visitor. Seok Muhi continues to talk to the leaders of 5 Peaks Fortress and tells them that they need to work hard not to let the Bandit Union's name go bad, and that he had gone to make sure everything was okay over there. Pung Yoncho listens to him carefully and proposes to take him to a comfortable place to rest, but the man interrupts him and asks him to introduce him to the 2 women in the group. Pung Yoncho is a little nervous and introduces the 2 girls, saying they are the 9th, Ki-yeon, and the 10th, So-beek, and at once, he offers her something to eat, but the man asks for silence and looks with interest at the girls, who were accompanied by Cholson. Pung Yoncho notices the way Seok Muhi looks at the girls and thinks they should leave immediately. And together with the second brother, they try to take Seok Muhi away from the fortress to a restaurant in the village. But Ki-yeon asks the visitor the reason for his visit, and he is touched by the girl's beauty and way of speaking and tells her that he is there for work, to test if they deserve to carry the Bandit Union flag, and if they were not qualified, he should eliminate them. Seok Muhi goes on to say that the elite 10 of the 5 Peaks have earned the respect of the people in Henan province, and that is good for the Bandit Union. Therefore, he thinks it would be a pity to eliminate them all, because he believes that some of them are talented. To culminate with his speech, the man says that after what he had seen and heard, he was going to recognize the Five Peak Fortress as part of the Bandit Union, and showing a scroll, he invites them to the Bandit Union tournament that was going to be held in October in Gangnam. When the chief opens the scroll, he reads from the invitation that the tournament they had been invited to sought to unite all the fortresses that were part of the Bandit Union in order to defeat the 7 cults and the 2 orthodox schools. After reading, the chief was very proud to finally be recognized as part of the Bandit Union. Seok Mui tells everyone that he has done his job and now he wants to be given a drink. Poong Yeoncho calls his second brother and proposes that they finally take their visitor to take safe care of him, and together they take him out of the fortress to prevent Jioka from waking up. At the restaurant, Poong Yeoncho, Gamyeong and their visitor, Seok Mui, are already seated enjoying the food, and the 2 brothers from the fortress ask Seok Mui if he likes it. But the man only thinks of the 2 girls from the fortress, and although the brothers try to distract him and propose to take him to have fun somewhere else, he demands that he only wants to see the 2 girls from the fortress, bring them to him. The 2 brothers muttered about what they should do, and finally, Poong Yeoncho tells Poong Yeoncho that he doesn't think the girls want to enter the place where they are, because it is a bar. But the man insisted, and seeing that they would not take them, he angrily returned to the fortress and, furious, told the brothers that if he did not see them, he would destroy the 5 Peaks fortress. Upon arriving at the fortress, Seok Mui, drunk, starts shouting for the girls, while the 2 brothers ask him to lower his voice, and everyone in the fortress comes out of their rooms because of the noise. When he sees the girls, Seok Mui asks them to come to him and prepare a table with drinks for him, but again the chief of the fortress and the second brother try to take him somewhere else. Seok Mui feels offended and threatens them again to wipe out the fortress. Poong Yeoncho asks him again to accompany them and tells him it is for his own good, and Seok Mui doesn't believe him and, even angrier, shouts louder, demanding to be served and insulting everyone. Suddenly, a voice is heard asking who is making so much noise at that time of the night. Everyone turns around, and it was what the brothers feared. Jioka had woken up. Seok Mui is shocked and annoyed this new man is talking, who tells him that if he is drunk, he should go to sleep, and furthermore asks him what is he doing invading the fortress and making so much noise. Jioka was not seen among so many people, and the man, angered by his words, sends him to come closer to punish him for offending him, and the boy comes closer. Jioka confronts Seok Mui and asks him how he is going to punish him. And the man, astonished, asks in an insulting tone who is that boy, but no one answers him. Everyone is like statues, waiting for the worst. Jioka again asks the man what he intends to do to punish him. Seok Mui, after hearing him, decides to calm down and ignore him. He believes that not everyone in the fortress is smart, and this boy is one of them, so he turns his back on him and leaves. Jioka took it as an insult from that man to turn his back on him and asked him if he was afraid of him. The man turned around even angrier than before, and everyone, especially the chief and the second brother, were lamenting what was about to happen and asked the boy to please not kill him. Jioka stood on guard to fight with the man, and Seok Mui, a bit amazed by his energy, smiled and also prepared to fight with the young man, summoning the yin wind to show his power. The girls and the first 2 brothers are thinking about what can happen and think of a way to stop them, but he doesn't know how. Seok Mui tells the boy that he can kill him without much effort, but he is going to hurt him to see him suffer and beg to spare his life. He will kill him very slowly and launches an attack. Jioka, after dodging his attack and listening to him, tells him that he doesn't think he can hurt him and tells him to take the fight seriously. The man is amazed, because many warriors have fallen after receiving such an attack, and this boy has avoided it. After some thought, he realizes that this boy is the reason the 5 Peaks fortress is famous in the province, but his thoughts are interrupted by Jioka's voice, who asks him to take the fight seriously. Seok Mui smiles and feels that finally, after a long time, he will have an opponent worthy of him, the ruler of Yin Wind. Jioka hears his name and laughs. He thinks it is a very silly name. Seok Mui is offended and tells him to watch what he says, because he will regret it. The boy again offends the man, calling him slow, and Seok Mui, even angrier, launches his Yin Wind Corpse Claw attack, but Jioka stops him, only with 2 fingers. Seok Mui does not understand what is going on and remembers the time he spent learning his technique, and that after learning it, he had never lost a fight before. But now, Seok Mui believes that his only alternative to win is to apply the most lethal of his techniques, and tells Jioka not to blame him, because he asked for it. And when he goes to attack him, Jioka takes his hand and introduces himself, and then tells him that he will not allow him to hurt his friends and attacks him, while his older brother yells at him not to do it. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. Well guys, if you like this video and you want a second part, comment below with the word sword. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.